just D, but
It's why we ask questions.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. It's December 20th. We're in the chamber with Commissioner Peck and myself. Commissioner Mullen is out. We still have a quorum. We got the administrator, Mr. Davidson, and the clerk of the board. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join me in the pledge. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of vouchers. I believe we have one this morning.
Multiple copies of the same thing. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $1,605,324.50 as presented to the board for approval, and note for the record that has been reviewed and signed off by the county administrator and 2 representatives of the county auditor's office.
I second. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda, and I believe there are 8 items on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have 4 items on the consent agenda this week that I'd like to pull for separate discussion. One is the IT package talking about software for GASB compliance. Second is the juvenile justice package on operating costs and facility costs. The third is the Planning Commission or the Planning Department package on business licenses. And then the fourth one is the proposed ordinance in compliance with state law on compost. And for numbers,
I believe the compost,
that's a separate, that's not a consent item, is it?
no,
No, that's on the agenda.
yeah, it's on the agenda.
Okay. Well, I
But you
didn't,
did mention 4, didn't you not? Can you just give the numbers of the 4? Because I'd also,
I didn't put down the numbers this week. Normally I do, but if you give me a moment, I can tell you it's item 3, which is the debt book contract, and I'm looking for the juvenile justice one. It looks like that
4.
is item 4. So just 3 and 4, and if it's okay with the board, I can just ask my questions, and we can keep these in the consent if you prefer. They're not deep questions, but they're things I'd like to have answered before I vote on them.
and I would like to have some questions answered on 1, the agricultural burn cooperative agreement.
Well, since 1 comes before 3, perhaps you would start.
All righty, so I'm asking, who do I speak to? And it's Derek.
Well, we'll see.
So
This
I-
is my item.
I realize that this is something that's been in play for a long time, but we no longer issue the permits. It is the
Conservation District.
Conservation District.
Correct.
And so they are obtaining these funds? Are they retaining them, or do they come back to us, or?
No, they don't, from what I recall, and I would have to double check, but I believe it's the Conservation District, it's I want to say $2 an acre.
It is $2, because I couldn't find
Yeah.
any amount in here either. That was my other question.
Yeah, and that's basically, this is the same contract and agreement we've had with them since 2016. It's just rolled over and just the dates change.
Right.
But it's something we have to do every 2 years because of some rule of ecology where
Right.
we have to reissue this agreement every 2 years.
So
as
it's
opposed-
$2 an acre, and how much is the pile burn?
I don't have, I don't think I printed that off. I
And
apologize.
if I realize that, or if I understand this correctly, the monies then go to the state?
Part of it goes to the state. Ecology, I believe, gets $2 or $1.50, something like that. And then conservation gets $2 or $2.50 I can't remember, the exact sense. But from what I recall, I don't believe, because we don't really do anything with regard to it. We just hand out information for people seeking that information and then route them to talk to the conservation district.
And this has sort of been a burr on my side because we've looked for filters and we've looked for the apparatus that cleans the air, but we've never seen anything. All they're doing is collecting money, and they utilize
Talking about
this.
ecology?
Yes.
Oh,
So it's just another drop in the bucket for them to collect money from the citizens and really regulate us to the point where their fires all occur at the same time, and it makes it look worse than it is.
yeah, this agreement is basically, we would have to do all of that anyways. Now, I would assume, get the $2.50 per acre returned back to the county. I don't think that it would pay for the efforts involved in the processing and monitoring of the system.
So it's basically, I'm just not happy with this situation, and it used to be $5 an acre, so it has come down.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's rare.
So that ends that discussion, so we'll move on down to item 3 for Commissioner Peck.
I don't see anybody from IS, so I think I'm probably directing these questions more your way. This package is the one that talks about GASB compliance for financial statements, and it's looking to purchase software to do this work. And my questions, and I'll just put them all on the table at once and we can work through them. I don't believe that this is a new requirement under the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB. And so my question is, who has been doing this work until now? How have they been doing it without this software? How much time does this save? And the reason I'm asking these questions is that the cost for this software is not a one-time. This is a recurring cost that we're going to have each and every year going forward, and it's equivalent of about 1/4 of an FTE. So it's it's not a huge amount of money, but still, it's as if we're adding 1/4 of an FTE to a department. So this is something that I wouldn't have put on consent probably because of this issue, but it's also something that most people might not have been as concerned about. So really, maybe we can just start with, is this new work, or are we paying somebody else with software to do work that we're already paying employees to do? Help me understand.
Yes, and we do have a person here from the auditor's office. But I'll tell you, was consulted about this, and this is actually a new GASB. GASB continues to throw curveballs at us all the time. Sometimes I wonder if we'd be better off to just go to cash basis financial statements and give up GASB, to tell you the truth. But
Yeah.
I didn't say that. But
I'll say it.
But this is a new requirement, and this is actually in anticipation of yet another GASB yet to come, is it not?
Yeah, they're two very challenging GASBs that they're GASB 87. You've heard of it before because it keeps getting pushed back. This year's finally the year that it's implemented. You'll see actually across the state, across the country, many other counties and cities are using DebtBook. I've listened to several demos. Visual Lease, Lease Query. Tim also listened to Easy Lease. DebtBook's a little bit more spendy than the others, but they just focus on government. And these other ones, they're focusing on private. So GASB 87 is leases. We're going to have over 75 contracts to read through and make those important decisions to prevent having findings. And while we can help determine that, this is for the amount that they're proposing, that they're going to do a white glove for an extra $3,000 where they'll look through all of our contracts. I think that's money very well spent. And as far as continuing year after year, that's a good question. I think especially this first year, getting through the contracts and stuff, it's going to be a real lifesaver for us. And I think the amount of other governments doing, I mean, City of Pasco's doing it. I know many of the other counties and cities, City of Spokane, just to name a few, but I can get a lot more references for you if you
So,
like.
so what is a white glove? You referred to that. It's a level of service, it sounds like, but I didn't see it defined.
Okay, so white glove is where they'll read through all of our contracts and make that decision. Is this truly a lease? And depending on what they come up with or what we come up with them, that's going to determine how we do the
Okay.
accounting on that side.
I think you said the white glove was an extra 3,000. Let's assume that there is no white glove, then what work is it that they're doing? If white glove is the process of reading the contracts and making that determination, what are they doing for the?
I think what makes them extra special over the other ones, they actually offer a few other things too. So
I'm sorry, I don't think I asked that question very well. There's a base cost of about 20,000.
Okay.
And then there's a quote-unquote white glove that's an extra 3,000. What I'm asking is, what's the 20,000 for if the white glove 3,000 is to read the contracts and determine if they're,
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just looking, is that to purchase the software?
So for $15,000 is what it's at. We get up to 150 contracts. Yeah, for the software, it's $15,000.
So we pay that either way, but where I'm kind of stuck is it's an extra 3,000 for them to look at our contracts and determine if they're applicable and subject to GASB. And my question is, well, I thought that's what the software was supposed to do.
Well, it's not going to make those decisions, and it's not going to.
So is it just
it's
put
not
them
gonna
into the
read-
record? Is that what it does?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
great
All
place
right.
to consolidate all of that information into one. We're going to have to do journal entries from it, and there's other GASB reporting requirements that's kind of their niche. They've just really gone all in on this, and they're going to make us have a safer audit. And
So if we didn't do the white glove, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I'm just trying to understand what the 20,000 is for, really. And it sounds like it's software to catalog all these contracts, but the actual work of looking at them and determining their status and whether they're relevant under GASB is the extra 3,000, which sounds like a better deal than the 20,000, frankly,
Yeah.
because that's where the work is actually happening.
Exactly.
But,
And-
but all
and-
that aside, and forgive me, because I don't want to delay this anymore. I think you've really answered what I was concerned about. The focus of my questions is really that counties get handed new requirements from state and other governments all the time, and it doesn't come with funding to pay for it. And so I'm always looking at these to say, okay, this is essentially a quarter of an employee.
yes,
And that's a pretty big requirement for the state to, or whoever's levying this, and it looks like it's the state, to levy on us without any funding to do that. And they're obligated to provide that funding. So just having this discussion, this breakdown helps me when I go to Olympia next month to actually talk to legislators and say, here's a great example of a 1/4 FTE that you just dropped on us. And we really don't have any viable alternative other than to go buy software, and it's expensive.
yeah, and this is going to be nationwide as well, and I believe probably Canada as well.
This is a GASB requirement, so this is federal. Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're throwing that 3,000 in for free, so it's really 15,000 that they're throwing that white glove in for our implementation.
So for future years, presumably this is an ongoing, once we buy the software, that's the 20, and then we've got to continue to maintain and update that. I'm sure there's an annual fee for that. Who's going to do the work to look at new potential lease contracts each year?
So our plan is to look through on potentially as often as a weekly basis. Maybe it'll be monthly, but we're going to look through all the resolutions to determine on an ongoing basis which ones are going to be close to that decision. Is it going to be a lease, or the future one is SPIDAs? That's GASB 96, and that's subscription-based information technology arrangements. And so anything from your Microsoft or whatever it is. there's going to be a whole bunch of other contracts to go through next year, because that's when that one goes live and for the financials for 2023.
Okay, so this essentially gets us caught up and compliant.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be buried, and you probably won't get through this stack before you get the new ones next year. Is that what I'm
Right.
hearing?
Yes, just
Okay.
because it's starting in 2022. We've got a whole backlog of.
Okay.
We haven't even gone through the contract, so I think it's very wise for
Okay.
Franklin County to make.
Well, I
this-
appreciate the education. It's not like it's a huge amount of money in the context of our budget, but I just have this problem with the legislature and, in this case, the federal government dumping stuff on us that we don't have a choice and they don't pay for it, so.
It seems like a very good product. They also have debt. That's where they started. So even bonds and such, they have great reports on that as well. That you guys should be able to have access to all this as well.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for being here and for educating me on that. It's not a subject that I think any of us are real deep in, except maybe you and Dwayne.
Well, thanks for the questions.
Okay. And then the next one was on the juvenile justice package. I want to pull that one up, make sure I've got the right one. Right, so this one, my understanding is that our costs with juvenile justice are predicated on the Office of Financial Management's estimation of our at-risk youth population in the service area. And that generates a percentage, X percentage of them are in Franklin County and X percentage of the total in our service area are in Benton County. And we typically have run somewhere in the high 20s to low 30s percentile. And so this package says that Franklin County is responsible for 35.9% of the operations budget and 28% of the facilities budget. And so, Dwayne, the reason this caught my eye is because of our discussions about a new juvenile justice facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen that I can recall a breakout between our percentage share for facilities costs as opposed to our percentage costs for O&M. It's always been presented that I can recall as one percentage number for the whole package, if you will. So I wanted to ask if anyone knows or is aware of why these are split out, or if they recall them being split out in the past, and whether we do or not, just offer that as we're in this current discussion with Benton County about updating juvenile justice, I think it's one of the key questions is, what is our percentage obligation? Is it the O&M percentage, or is it the facility percentage? Given that the O&M is roughly 36% and the facility percentage responsibility is only 28, that's about an 8-point difference, which could be millions of dollars for Franklin County.
And to tell you the truth, actually, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I actually thought that they were always separate numbers. So if that, I can check on that and get back to you, but I actually thought that they were separate numbers, and so this didn't catch my eye
Well,
when I
and
saw this.
yeah, and that's what I was saying is I don't recall seeing them as separate numbers. I'm being very clear. They probably were, and I just didn't see it. Most of the packages that come through are just on the O&M side. So anyway, if we could maybe just as we go through this negotiation, this discussion,
Absolutely.
make sure that we've got that right percentage.
Yeah.
So
And
if
those-
I understand you correctly, then we need to pull number 4. We haven't made a motion yet, but we need to pull number 4.
I'm not concerned about number 4, Chairman, based on Mr. Davidson's recollection that these have historically been separate numbers, and the fact that they are separate numbers works to Franklin County's advantage in this current discussion, so there's no harm done. It was
Okay.
more important to understand if they really are separate percentages, and if they are, that we make sure we follow that all the way through this update process, because it saves us a lot of money potentially.
Well received, yeah.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
so we've had our discussion. I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have public comment. Is there anybody in the room or anybody on the phone? Okay.
On the Office of Financial Management's
estimation
of our risk youth population
Hello?
in the service
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Yeah, I've been waiting for public comment. I guess you're in the middle of the meeting. I don't know. I was looking at the agenda. I don't know where we are right now. I mean,
You're on the agenda right now, sir. Go ahead.
well, I'm watching live stream. There's something else going on. I don't know.
It's delayed, so this is a
Oh.
delayed
So
broadcast.
I'm sorry. Ha! Okay. Anyway, yeah, let me turn the speaker down. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to call in, yeah, I'm watching all your stuff with software and business and, yada, yada, on who's doing what with money or whatever contracts. But I have a real concern with another issue, and that is remember here back not long ago when they did Event 201 with Bill Gates and the WHO, and they practiced what are we going to do if there's a big coronavirus outbreak, and and so they all bang their heads with all this forethought, and then lo and behold we have the coronavirus outbreak, and the rest of the history. The patents for the virus and the patents for the injections, they were already made before we had a pandemic. Bill Gates has made well over $20 billion. He's hoping to make $200 billion just off the coronavirus. He's really rubbing his hands hard. But what's alarming is recently in October, in October, I forget the date, I think it's 12th, Bill Gates and company and WHO, they got together for a new one called catastrophic contagion. So here we go again, where they're rubbing their hands, and what are we going to do with this catastrophic contagion? Now this time, the viruses the gain-of-function work's already been done at the University of Ohio, okay? And this particular gain-of-function work results in a virus, sort of like coronavirus, except this one's a lot better. It has an 80% kill rate, and it targets young people, schools, school-age kids, kindergarten through whatever, high school, and it's got an 80% death rate. Now, again, I've given speeches, I've talked, I've pleaded, saying, why are these people allowed to continue on with this? So I don't know what our county is going to do when Bill Gates and company releases this, but it's got an 80% death rate. Now, again, I always tell people, don't believe me. Go look at what's being said at the WHO. Follow these great leaders that are leading us into a cemetery. And ask yourself, why in the hell are these people allowed to do work on gain of function, which is totally against all rules of the whole planet? It's totally illegal, and they're continuing on. So I'm suggesting right now two things. Number one, I'm done with conversations. I want actions. These people need to be arrested. There needs to be Nuremberg trials. They need to be taken in, prosecuted, found guilty, and then whatever the military wants to do with them, that's what happens next. But I'm done. I mean, they've already attacked my family, other families. People all over the world now are dropping dead from myocarditis, heart attacks. They're pulling blood clots out of people that look like 3-foot-long rubber bands. It's self-assembling. It's horrible. It's a death cult that
Sir?
these people are involved in. So there you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Well, your 3 minutes is up, and your information is well taken.
Yeah, I'm worried. So, all right.
Thank you.
Talk later. Bye.
Anybody else on the phone?
Doesn't appear to be.
I believe Mr. Dockstetter has something for us.
I don't know if it's for you or not, but it's going to be addressed to you. Sheriff Raymond brought up something last week that I've been thinking about since the last meeting. And Benton County is basically forcing the mental health issue down our throats the way they want to do it. One of the questions I've got is why don't we use track? That building's used maybe 8 times, 10 times a year for a weekend, and the rest of the time it sits empty. Why don't we put our mental health facility there, keep the excess ground along the west and to the south, and give that facility to the behavioral health or whoever it is that's going to run this deal, and have a facility that we've dumped nothing but money in for the last 20 years, and let's use it for something that's good for the whole community, instead of going over and trying to revitalize, I don't know how old that old Welch deal is down there, and make that the mental health facility. And we could probably house everything we need in that one facility and have the parking. It's in an area that's not residential, it's not industrial, it's easy access for everybody in both communities to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone. Okay, next we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Davidson.
Now the budgets are complete, was able to get back to some of the unfinished projects, started working and gathering more information concerning the proposal from Benton County for the juvenile justice remodel. Also their proposal for Veterans Court, taking a look at that. Obtained 2 proposals for executive search for this position that will be on the agenda for next week. And have been working with staff on formulating a reporting from SVN Consulting, Simmons, out at the HAPO Center about the results of their, kind of like a profit and loss, if you will, a statement from them, so we can monitor the activity better out there, so.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Peck?
Let's see, this week had a meeting with the WASAC staff and the Legislative Steering Committee leadership to continue to refine our legislative priorities and schedules starting January 5th to be in Olympia pressing for county interests. Had a meeting with the Benton Franklin Council of Governments Executive Committee to review and approve new and updated bylaws and policies. One of those meetings that sounds like a short one, but actually takes several hours to go through those in detail. Hanford Area Economic Financial Investment Trust, the loan committee that is funded with tipping fees off of the facilities out at the Hanford Reservation. That board met yesterday. Majority of it was a lengthy executive session dealing with potential litigation, and I think that's the highlights for this week.
Okay, I had a meeting with the hospital district about the areas out there, and we've got a meeting scheduled for Thursday for the District 2. They're requesting some of the ARPA funds, and they're the only district without an ambulance, and we were going to meet with them on Thursday. Hanford community meeting, very interesting meeting. They're drafting a letter to send to the Department of Energy, and in that letter, of course, I'm attending virtually on my phone, so the size of print is pretty small, but in the discussion, I got wind that they are utilizing diesel at 45,000 gallons a day for the operation, I believe, of the reactor if power goes out. I believe that's what it was, but I'm not absolutely sure. I've asked for a copy of the letter, but I haven't received it yet. But we're facing, January 1, we're facing an increase in gasoline tax of 46 cents a gallon and 56 cents a gallon on all diesel, including farm diesel. And I'm just curious as to our governor's what his thought process is. I'm burning 45,000 gallons of diesel out there, and I know that government is exempt from all tax, or that this is not called a tax, it's called a fee. But again, the end user is going to be paying it as of January 1. So it's very alarming and concerning to me that as we are being suppressed with our usage of these necessities, we have Hanford proposing to use 45,000 gallons a day. And then today at noon is the department heads and elected meeting. And I attended the first one, and since Commissioner Mullen is gone, Commissioner Peck, are you interested in attending that today?
Well, I'd have to probably move a couple things. First, I've heard of it for today. It's at noon?
At noon today. You're right here in the commissioner room.
Let me get with you after the meeting and see if I can make that work.
And if you can't, I would be willing to attend, because the first one was very productive and very good. I hope you can attend.
Okay,
And
Mr.
that-
Chairman, if I could, just a clarification, you mentioned 45,000 some
Gallons,
gallons of
yeah.
diesel.
Our concern is for the
yeah.
environment.
No,
but
I understand. I don't think you meant to say to operate the reactor. We
I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
don't
what
have any-
exactly what it was for, but it was 45,000 gallons a day, and I'm just thinking, that is a lot of diesel to be burning.
Yeah, okay, well, just in the public interest, I've had similar discussions. I think it is for the vitrification plant. Is that?
Might be.
Yeah,
I don't
whether-
know. I've got to look. I've asked for the letter. I haven't received it yet.
Okay, well,
So,
just for the public's benefit, we've only got one reactor out there. It's Columbia Generating Station, and it is not burning diesel, so that they don't get 100 phone calls. I just-
No,
Yeah,
it's, and if
I
it
think it's
wouldn't,
for the VIT plant.
it might be for the VIT plant. I'm not absolutely sure again, but
I share your concern nevertheless.
it's just 45,000 gallons of diesel, and here we're going to be punished for using diesel at a more expensive rate, and gasoline, 46 cents a gallon.
There was line natural gas coming out of the Spokane area to cut across the middle of Franklin County, go under the river and feed the VIT plant. And I'm mindful of the governor's recent position on use of natural gas in the state. And it's, as you point out, a little ironic that he doesn't want us using natural gas, but it's okay to burn 45,000 gallons of diesel if in fact that's the number. So point taken.
All righty. Well, thank you. Then that concludes our Commissioner Administrator updates. Next, we have a proposed Public Works permit fee schedule. Mr. Erdman?
Currently, Franklin County doesn't charge for our road approach permits and out of 19 counties that we surveyed, all 19 have established permit fees for approaches. We've come to the board today to review our proposed schedule and to ask for approval. These take a significant amount of staff time to process and to inspect and verify.
Okay, is there a discussion?
I just noticed you dropped off some additional
That's
material.
for the next one.
Okay.
So Craig, I've got some questions here. This permit fee, you said all 19 other counties are charging, but as I look through the, that's county road approach. I'm on the wrong one here. As I look through this, I noticed that Grant County has only got a $50 fee. We don't charge anything. Another county that's close to us is Adams is at $25, and this is for all permits. And in your proposal, we are talking quite an increase here, 100 for address, $300 for commercial industrial. Gravel is $125, paved is $250, and private road is $300, and temporary is $200. And I'm just curious, as I look through these other counties, Grant is neighboring at $50 for all. Can you tell me how you came up with these
Well,
amounts?
as you look at the rest of the counties, the fee schedules are, there's quite a breadth of fee schedules. So we looked at the Appendix A of the WashDOT permit desk guideline, and we used that as a basis. And we're also, we're looking at the amount of cost that we expend to process these approaches. And, we're having a lot of growth and hence a lot of approaches. But, we're flexible. This is just where we landed. We thought was kind of middle of the road, and not as severe as it could have been, and not as inexpensive as it could be either. Like I said, we're just trying to recoup some of the costs that come out of County Road's pocket to process these. And for years and years, we have recovered zero.
It says that the last 3 years that you've amount spent last 3 years is $149,705. Average spent last 3 years is $49,000 a year. But the county road department is for the county residents, and
I wouldn't argue that,
Yeah,
but we too have expenses and
I agree.
revenue issues. And I feel it would bring us more in line with
And I looked at the RCW that's mentioned on the fiscal impact, and it says the RCW, and it's pretty simple. It just says, no person shall be permitted to build or construct any approach to any county road without first obtaining permission thereof from the board.
That's correct.
And so,
It is the board's prerogative to set the fees.
yep,
Doesn't 3675, 130 also require the county to recover costs from the benefited party?
Yes, it alludes to that, and I guess that's kind of.
I mean,
depends
it's,
on how you
in
interpret
essence,
that.
what I hear it saying is, if you're going to build an approach that benefits just your property, then you should pay for that. If we're going to build a section of road or something that benefits all the public, then that comes out of the Public Works normal budget and function and process. So there are some people who with multiple properties might want multiple approaches, which would be great to have the public pay for that, I suppose, if you're the property owner. But I think the statute requires the property owner to bear that cost. And I don't recall that it says should. I think it says that we shall.
I got it right here in front of me. That was number one that I read first. Number two says the boards of the several counties of the state may adopt reasonable rules for the construction of approaches which, when compiled with, shall entitle a person to build or construct an approach from any abutting property to any county road. The rules may include provisions for the construction of culverts under the approaches, the depths of fills over the culverts, and for such other drainage facilities as the board deems necessary. The construction of approaches, culverts, fills, or such other drainage facilities as may be required shall be under the supervision of the county road engineer. And all such construction shall be at the expense of the person benefited by the construction.
I think that's what we were just discussing, isn't it?
Right, so the construction part of it, I think it's clear that, it is up to the citizen or whoever is bringing us the approach. The cost to construct are clearly on them. The fee schedule from us to recoup what our administrative costs are to manage it, I don't know if that's falls under that clearly.
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. If I go to build a property or a building or something, and let's just say it's in the city to keep it separate from the county for a minute, I can't build that without a permit.
Correct.
And so the permit goes into my cost of building the facility. So I don't differentiate the two, but I suppose a person, if they want to look at the fine language, and they might find a way to try and separate those. But to me, that's part of the construction costs. And I realize people who actually do construction would probably take issue with that and say that it's not, but.
So being that this is just for the permit part of the, I'm inclined to keep it more to a minimum of maybe $100. And so I would be more to be in with Grant. We've got Ferry County at 60. We got Okanagan at 60, but over on the far side, it says after the fact fee is 120. What is after the fact fee?
That I'm not sure.
That sounds like a revenue gathering system to me.
I
Go
think
back and
that's-
readdress a malfunction, you know. some
I think that's the
error.
term for when someone does it without permission and then
Oh.
comes back later and either is asked to or fesses up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then we got Douglas County at 105, Columbia at 100, Chelan at 265, and the highest one on there is Kittitas at $437.
Yeah.
Yakima's at 275. So I don't want to discourage people from wanting an approach, and it says in here they got to pay for the whole approach. So I think we could be a little bit more lenient on our fee schedule and make it maybe round it off at $100 is what I'd like to see. I don't know what.
So, well,
So I'm curious, when we do analyses and we compare ourselves to other counties, we look for comparator counties. This is one of those relatively rare circumstances where we don't need to do that because the staff time required to produce a permit really doesn't vary by the county. In other words, Benton County takes just as much staff time as we do. And I don't see Benton on here, and because Benton is our adjacent county, in terms of equity in the marketplace and not driving development to other counties by excessive fees in Franklin and vice versa, my question would be, what is the Benton County fee?
I'll have to look that up, and I don't know if they didn't respond to us when we asked. But I can find that out, and, we can bring this back for further discussion after the first of the year.
And that'd be good because I'd like to have the other commissioner, being that he represents District 2, which is more of
We're
a,
fine with that.
that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I think it'd be interesting to know what Benton County charges.
We'll
Again,
try
it's-
and get that. I have some inside information now, so I can
Yeah,
get that
yeah.
for you.
Well, thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. So we'll table it until you can bring it back, and then we'll have a full slate of commissioners. Yes, Mr.
I just,
Davidson.
when you're inquiring from these other counties about what their actual fees are, have we ever asked them about a cost analysis about how they derive the fee? I mean, these are quantities that we know. You know about how many.
Right,
And you know what the costs are. It seems like we should be able to, that would really justifiable when when somebody's complaining about the fee, if you can actually show them, we're recouping the cost, and here's the proof of that.
And I believe I don't know that we didn't include a cost analysis, but the preliminary cost analysis from staff was that even the fee proposal that we brought forward isn't
Gonna cover it?
cover 100% of our costs in this. So, like I said, we were looking to kind of establish a permit fee, but we're willing to bring it back and address it at a future date.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So next, we'll move down to the county road approach policy. Mr. Erdman?
Yes, in 2014, the county adopted Resolution 2014-123 concerning the approach policies. Over the years, we had found a few ambiguities in language that we didn't think was clear. So we went back and readdressed those issues in this version of the approach policy, which I had given you a brief summary of what changes those were. We increased the assessed value of any structure from 25,000 to 35,000 to kick off the need for approach. I think in this environment, that's reasonable. We added any subdivision or modification of parcel boundaries that result in approach serving more than a single parcel may be required to construct an approach. That was unclear in the previous, it was kind of a gray area, and was finally, my interpretation was that we couldn't, but we needed to clean that up. If we're serving more than one, it needs to be addressed. We had a joint use fee and replaced it with first applicant response for approach. We streamlined the guide for applicants and made a step-by-step process that's easier to follow. We added a possibility of an additional charge for applicants who establish a history of requesting inspections, and when the approach is not ready, this is kind of a issue at times where they'll call us for an inspection and it's not ready, and it's just wastes our time to come out and look at it. So I'd like to charge an inspection fee for those times when that happens. Let's see, process to address when applicant fails to call for a preliminary inspection, resulting in automatic failed inspection. So unless the applicant is able to demonstrate work meets the permit requirements. So, we have issues where it just, well, I think it's kind of a little bit of the after the fact situation. So that's how we address that. We also changed language in there to make it, before there was some language that kind of tied us to standards that can change. So we redid the language so that as county road standards evolve, the approach permit policy will still be valid.
Okay.
And that was a big issue. That was a big issue for me, is that because the way it had been written before, it tied us to certain standards that, well, they change, and that means we have to come back and readdress the approach policy for something that it's really a separate issue.
And that, if you're finished, that leads me to my first question is, these approaches, we're requiring paved approaches to be up against paved roads, correct? Mm-hmm. So if a paved road is not an all-weather road and it becomes an all-weather road, does that paved approach then need to be tore up in order to make the all-weather road?
No, and generally, in the construction of the all-weather road, if there's additional asphalt that's needed on that approach, as we bring it up to that standard, it will generally be addressed in the construction.
So it will not be destroyed?
No, not unless there's a significant grade change, and under those circumstances, then the approach would be rebuilt to standard as part of the construction contract.
Because under the financial impact, it says there is no financial impact associated with the new approach policy, and that needs to be clarified to government, because there is a financial impact to the resident. These approaches are $6,000, I understand?
That's what I have heard. I don't know that.
What about all the approaches that are out there that are already, like my driveway off of Glade Road, it doesn't have a paved approach. Are we going to start to incorporate where those have to be paved?
Well, those are non-conforming approaches.
Okay.
So they were grandfathered in. And so what happens is if something happens, if there's some development on the property that would trigger an approach permit, then the non-compliant approach would have to be brought up to current standard.
Okay.
That's how we went about addressing that, so that we weren't forcing everybody to go and bring every approach in the county up to standard all at once, which would have been, pretty horrific. But But so,
I've
and
just-
hence, that's why we redid a little bit of that language, so that's a little clearer how that process works.
I've just had some fellow residents out there complaining about that they have to put this paved approach on, and it's not an all-weather road, and
No, but we're trying to, the purpose of the approach being paved is to help preserve the edge, shoulder edge of the road. There's a lot of damage that comes in that transition from gravel to asphalt, and we'd soon push that away from the road and not right on the edge of it. So that's one of our prime considerations for doing that.
Okay.
And as I said, if we do bring the road up to all-weather standards in the future, approaches are addressed in the construction contract and will be part of that.
okay. And again, I would like to see our fellow commissioner here to also address this. I'd like to table this one too, but I'll let Commissioner Peck have his questions if he has some.
So maybe we could look at page 7, paragraph G.
Yes.
Title is permit fee required in applications. Is this the same discussion we just had a few minutes ago?
Yes, I think we put that language in case we did have, but if it's zero, it's zero. But we can change that depending on, at first, and I was going to bring this to the board last week as one item, but I wanted the approach fees as a separate item to be dealt with.
Sure.
On a
Point
DP
I'm
basis.
making is we kind of have to answer the fee question before we can pass a policy that says that there's a fee required. I personally think that a fee is appropriate. We ought to be doing cost recovery on these things where it's the only beneficiary is really the property owner, not the public. So I don't have a problem with a fee. I do think we need to have an analysis that explains what our estimated cost is of producing that permit and then set our fees at or below that amount. And it sounds like you've already done that preliminarily. Look forward to seeing the Benton County numbers. So it does seem premature to be able to take action on this without exempting that piece. Second observation or question is, just like pretty much any other policy, ordinance, resolution, this board has the authority to make adjustments and updates. And so I'm not overly concerned about every fine point and detail in this lengthy document, because once it's in use, if it appears or becomes obvious that there's some part of it that needs to be adjusted, it's easy for us to do that. So I don't see anything of it that looks like it's non-standard or different to what other counties are doing. So I'm generally fine with it. I just think we have to clear up that permit fee issue first.
All right, Mr. Erdman, I thank you. I think we'll table these two until a further meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have the compost procurement draft ordinance.
Yes, so E2 SHB 1799 requires cities and counties to adopt a compost procurement ordinance by January 1 of 2023. I wrote a draft ordinance for your review and your guidance. It's late in the day, I realize, but there have been a real lack of model ordinances that I found were suitable for our needs, and I did find one eventually and adapt it for Franklin County. But I generally brought it to the board for your remarks and guidance as in how to proceed.
I really only had one question on this one. This is in section 3, the general policy, and it may be language, grammar, it might even just be semantics, but it is perhaps not as clear as it could be. It's talking about, well, there's only two sentences. Let me just read them. Franklin County shall purchase finished compost products for use in public projects, in which compost is an appropriate material in county projects or on county land, provided it's not cost prohibitive to acquire. And the question I have has to do with the definition of cost prohibitive, which is the next sentence. And it says cost prohibitive is defined as a product purchasing cost that exceeds 10% of the cost of another product. I could read that by saying is, the cost of another product, let's say it's $500,000. Well, 10% of that cost is $50,000. And I think what you meant to say is that it exceeds the cost of an alternative project by
Right.
an additional 10%. It's
okay.
It's a subtlety, but I think grammatically, if you read it, I think it really says 10% of the other bid, which of course is not the intent. So it's a subtlety, but I think just a couple of word changes there.
I appreciate the markups. This, to be honest, is the first ordinance I've ever written, and it's largely adapted from someone else's, so I apologize for, Hemingway, I'm not.
Well, I think the intent is clear enough. I just don't think the language mirrors the intent. Not a big deal until somebody challenges you on it. So pretty simple thing, and it's pretty clear from looking at the statute, which is the Substitute House Bill 1799. This had a fair amount of debate back in the early part of 2022 when this thing came to us. I'm going to stop there just to avoid being overly political.
So, of course, we're talking about composting. Are we talking about all composting in the county, even the gardener in the backyard?
I don't think so. This would be the green, it's specifically kind of written towards green materials that end up at the landfill.
Right.
So they're trying to move those things out, and I don't want to speak to it because private side has a whole bunch of things on their list that they need to do. They'll have to be, is there, is the county or cities or whatever providing a site to put these materials and process them? Is there one available? And they have 2 years of rulemaking still ahead in this, so it's a bit of a moving target. So no to the household gardeners compost. It's just stuff that's ending up towards the landfill.
So we're asking to have this in order when they're still creating what we're putting together. And we're under a timeline here?
They would like it by the first of next year, of 2023. And like I said, it kind of came out of nowhere. I first heard of it probably in September, October, and finding draft ordinances took a while. There were a lot of ones that were very unsuitable for the county.
Well, I agree. I think we need to keep the green vegetation out of the landfills. I think it does need to be compost, or if it's tree material, it can be shredded, and we're really finding a way of weed control with orchards that are grinding up their trees. We're utilizing that product. So I think it's a step in the right direction. But again, I don't know if it's a moving target. How do we know what they're putting in the final pages?
I guess my main question comes down to is, do you want me to proceed with the change in language that Commissioner Peck's suggested? And if you'd redline for that for me, I'd appreciate it. Would you want me to present it? I won't be available for next week's meeting, but would it be all right to bring it to the consent agenda for approval next week?
I don't support it going in the consent agenda. I think we need to have another discussion about it, and I don't think that it's time sensitive. The state, while they're in the rulemaking process, is not going to be, pounding at anybody for it.
I think we do have more time.
We've got plenty of time on this, in my opinion. The intent, obviously, is to keep material out of the landfill and try and force the hand of counties and make us buy products that otherwise would have gone there. And all in all, that's probably not bad. I will tell you that from my previous work experience in the energy field, there are some people who argue that some of the green waste going into landfills actually helps with the biodegradation process and the production of methane, which is then captured and used in power plants, and that's better than having that go in the atmosphere, and that if you remove all this material, that the biodecomposition that produces this useful gas is diminished. So this is typical, in my opinion, legislative gobbledygook that has an intent behind it, and we're going to go through a lot of effort, and I'm not sure that it's going to give them the desired effect. So I'll get off my soapbox and just say I don't think that there's a hurry on this, and you might even want to contact other counties that have been down this road. I know you've looked at some for templates, but ask them what sort of things they tripped over, and just kind of look through ours, make sure we're not going to do the same.
Will do.
Well, thank you, Mr. Erdman.
Thank you.
We will see you at a later date.
Indeed.
All right, next on the agenda is the amendment to the moratorium adopted through ordinance 04-2022. Mr. Breton.
Yes, this is the moratorium we passed back in, I want to say August, to bring the county into compliance with the Growth Management Hearings Board ruling. On October 28th, there was a compliance hearing on that action. Growth Management Hearings Board stated that in their interpretation, we were not in compliance. They provided rationale, or, they articulated where their concerns were. We modified or amended basically it came down to section 4 and 5, the moratorium effect and timeline. So we had language in there before, especially subs II, in section 5. The language there they weren't happy with. Their interpretation was such that it would provided a loophole where the county could lift the moratorium without being in compliance. So we modified the language to better articulate and satisfy and ensure the board, the Growth Management Hearings Board, that we're not doing anything until we get this all figured out legally. So that's really what the change in those sections was for. Your packet had a clean version, and it's in blue, but or maybe it is in red. I can't remember now. My computer switches back and forth. But anywho, you had different language. It's nuanced language. Doesn't material change anything like towards the actual allowances allowed or anything along those lines. It just merely clarifies that we're not going to do anything to violate the Growth Management Hearings Board ruling and we'll take this through the courts, and until we have a ruling one way or the other from an authority that can actually do that, we're going to maintain the status quo. But we're also not going to acknowledge that we agree with the board's interpretation of our comprehensive plan.
And I'd suggest that we put together a letter questioning this board on its representation of our area. Mr. Hinkle is part of the board. He's up there on the pass. And then we have the member from Spokane that his wife sits on FutureWise, right? Correct?
She did. I
She
understand
did.
she no longer
Well,
works.
it's still a conflict of interest. He didn't recuse himself. You asked him to be removed, and he fought it. And the third person is from the west side. So I'm curious as to who is our representation here to make the decision for this growth area that we're proposing. Who's representing us? And that, just a simple letter to ask them. where is our representation in this matter? Because we don't have any. I would ask the other commissioners to join. Maybe we could formulate a letter and pose to them as to how they're giving us any ability to have representation.
So Mr. Hinkle is in Cle Elum, which is close to the pass. The statute that establishes this hearings board, statute's probably plural now, spells out that there's representation from western, eastern, I think there's a central as well. And it's 2 members from each. One has to be an attorney, the other has to be a president or past elected. Mr. Hinkle is a past elected, and I think the other individual is an attorney. So whether we like it or not, I think they're in compliance with the statute. Moreover, I don't see a letter as inducing them to see things our way. They might take it in just the opposite fashion. I don't usually have a problem asking people, and I don't shy away from questions, but in this case, I don't see it producing a productive outcome. This red line material, which is really the key to the document, was produced in part by our outside GMA attorney.
Correct. And then it was also vetted through the city of Pasco and the Port of Pasco and our internal. Jen also reviewed the language as well.
Yeah, and should we opt not to do anything with this, what is the, in your opinion at least, what's the result?
Does a couple things. One would be maintain out of compliance based on their ruling up until we get an answer from the board or court. So we wouldn't, what we're trying to do is get into compliance. If we get them to say, yeah, you're in compliance, then any sanctions such as access of some state dollars and things like that, those would be lifted. I don't know that we've ran into that occurrence at this point for any of our particular grants or projects, but so that's our goal. It also doesn't look good to the courts if we're not complying with them, doing what we can to comply with the Growth Management Hearing Board without actually, capitulating to their decision or anything along those lines, but showing that we're respecting the Growth Management Hearings Board, and that's part of, so it's also a perception thing. But mostly it's because actually under law, that's what we're supposed to do.
Well, either path takes us through the courts, and the courts ultimately decide. So it seems to me the wise thing is for us to maintain, if not in fact, at least the appearance of working in good faith. I think we are, in fact, but probably not in our best interest to do something that could be perceived as not operating in good faith, because as you point out, the courts might take a dim view of that. So as much as I'm not inclined to want to just give in to the dictates of the Growth Management Hearings Board, the statutes support them. They're appointed by the governor, and our redress is the courts. So we have to probably put our best foot forward and preserve our reputation and our opportunities in the courts rather than do anything that would diminish that. And to me, that all says you go ahead and approve this and move forward through the process. First, do no harm.
That's our recommendation.
Okay.
And just so you know, we believe the statutes support our position, not theirs.
Well, and,
So-
that's,
But
as
the
I point out,
statutes support their authority to make our lives miserable if we don't.
well, they have the authority to make these decisions,
Right,
and
exactly.
our redress is with the courts. Because as I pointed out, these are not elected positions, they're appointed by the governor. And so if our opportunity to get this fixed is with the courts, let's put our best foot forward, which means accepting your recommendation. At least that's my view.
The amendment is for how long?
The moratorium, it doesn't change any timelines or anything like that. It just
Yeah.
articulated a better clarification as to the three, when when we would, how we would lift the moratorium, or if we would, but if it, so it's still that same timeline that we've had before. So in 6 months, if this hasn't been settled, we'll hold another public hearing. We'll determine whether or not we want, where we want to do at that point. The hope is, of course, that this will be taken care of before then. It's a matter of what happens at the appeals court, which is, we're hoping sometime in late January, early February. We'll get that ruling. There's only one step after that, and that's the Washington State Supreme Court. Well, I guess we could try to go federal, but I don't think it'd reach their level. So the hope is that the appeals court rules in our favor, and future-wise doesn't choose to challenge that to the Supreme Court. My experience with this in the past was, we went to the appeals court, then the Washington State Supreme Court didn't want to review, because that's basically all that happens, is they review and they determine whether or not there's some material wrong that was done by the appeals court. That's what the Supreme Court does. Otherwise, that appeals court's ruling generally stands. So we should have an answer in
January?
January, February. Unfortunately, it's not our control. It's up to their system and how, but that's what we're estimating, is that it'll be in late January, early February. We'll get that answer. Should it go against us and we choose not to go and petition the Supreme Court, then staff would go and implement regulations that we've got drafts of to accommodate this need. And we would start a process there to.
And is this time sensitive, it needs to be done today, or could we wait a week?
This does need to be done today. Well, it's due, I guess we could postpone it to the 27th, but it is due by the 28th.
I'd like to have it in the next meeting for Commissioner Mullen to have to weigh in on this, because this is a very important item for our county.
My only concern regarding that is that we would have one day. It has to be in to the court, or to the hearings board by the 28th, and that's why it was brought today, in case. But, and again, it's not really changing anything. It's clarifying the intent that we already had and we've already voted to adopt.
Yeah. Do we have a meeting on the 27th? Okay. Historically, sometimes we don't have a meeting in between Christmas and New Year's, but that's fine. Administrative question, and Derek, you or somebody can help me with this. The existing ordinance is 04/2022, right?
Correct.
And so this is an update or an amendment to it.
Correct.
And I guess administratively, I'm wondering if the title of this shouldn't appropriately be the same title that's there, but preceded with update to county ordinance declaring an emergency and establishing a moratorium. I mean, it seems odd that we have an existing ordinance and we're going to
That we're
pass
modifying.
another ordinance with the same number and the same title without distinguishing it as an update. And maybe it's a non-issue administratively. I personally don't care, but I just want to make sure that we're creating a proper record, whether it should be 04/2022 Bravo, or whether the title can just be preceded with an update to ordinance 04/2022, or maybe it doesn't matter.
I think we're updating the exact same title, so just like in any RCW or other ordinance update, I think the point's well taken to maybe distinguish the fact that update using the same number or scheme, I think, is consistent with what has been done previously when we write or change or modify. That's the
Yeah.
point of the public.
I didn't see any language in here saying that this replaces or somehow, I forget the, excuse me, the specific language for it, but typically it'll say something that, language here
Is hereby amended.
And that might be helpful.
replaces or supersedes 04/2022 approved on such and such date. There ought to be something in here, because if you had, I suppose if you had these two side by side, you could look at the dates to see which one was the later, but I just thought it odd that there wasn't anything in there distinguishing this from the original.
So Derek,
What about putting in a B?
I think we could do either one, simple, just put in a B, or simply add in a line that says this repeals all prior.
Repeals and supersedes, yeah.
so
Yeah.
Derek, I got this one handed to me this morning. It said it was revised. Is there any changes from the one that's in my book to this one right here?
Again, minor, the lawyers were, okay, so I got a version, and that's what's in your packet. Then Todd met with the city of Pasco and the port, and they made some more little tweaks to it, and that's the version that you were handed today. I didn't get that until yesterday. So, and I discussed with Karen as to best process for that. But again, it's frankly, when I was reading the difference, it is a little clearer. It is a little more precise, but again, no material change
Yeah.
to.
As long as you've got something in there that says this supersedes the one signed on previous date, that addresses my primary concern. If there's been Scrivener's errors that have been corrected, that's fine. But if it's anything material, then it probably needs to go back past our civil office just to make sure that the changes are acceptable.
So,
So we're going to go to the civil offices before we sign it?
I'd like to see not a severability, but a, excuse me, boy. Something just indicates that this replaces the previous one. And if there are material changes based on what you said, it went to the city. If there's any material changes, then ought to at least run those by our civil office.
they were,
They were.
yeah, Sean's cell.
Oh,
saw
so
the-
you gave Commissioner Didier a copy that I think you just said a few minutes
I
ago.
gave Karen a copy so, yeah, I didn't,
So the one that we have
I
includes
assume
the
that-
changes from the city, and they've been through the civil office?
Yes, is that the version? I don't know what version you were actually given.
Yeah, I don't either. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. So they have, no, I did not. Yeah, but that doesn't go to the commissioners. It's you guys and Dwayne.
Yeah, and
I apologize.
And
for
I'm not
that.
inclined to take updates last minute by email, because sometimes I see them, sometimes I don't. So I think you need to add a line in there that says this supersedes the previous 04/2022, and just make sure that our civil folks have seen the latest changes in case they are material. And if we have to do it on the 27th, that's fine, or we can do a short special meeting on just this topic, and it'd take us 20 minutes to get it passed,
I'll
but
be here on the 27th anyways. If that's the will.
sounds like we
can-
all will be.
Yeah, I guess we'll make those modifications, and in fact, I think I don't see any issue really wrong with being redundant, so changing it to 04/2022B, and then putting in a whereas, it basically states whereas this update, and then probably modifying the title a little, updating the declaration, so language along that line. We'll get that.
I would suggest we put that in the ordained section. If we're
Right.
superseding,
Oh, okay.
add it there.
Yep, okay.
That this is superseding that and repealing
Especially since that's where the change, yeah, okay. All right, but we'll get this, but, go ahead.
it. I was just gonna add, if that's the only change the commissioners would like, we could simply adopt that today. We'll add that language in there and then forward with getting the signatures. Board members, we can add it. We can get, go ahead today, with that change and, move it forward. give Commissioner Mullen a chance to look that over and weigh in offline so we can continue to move forward with it, and if there's a concern, rather than being up on a date, because the next date, that is essentially the next business. Friday and Monday are going to be holiday, not for our office on Friday, but for everybody else in the county. A holiday and Monday, so essentially we won't have much time to do really much of anything else. So I would just propose that we add that concern language into this, if we can adopt it today, and then,
And we have your consent that you have reviewed it already?
yeah, this was actually reviewed both with Jen, but also with our outside counsel that's working the appeal, and they recommended that language.
Okay.
Because what I did
Oh,
not-
yeah.
I did not want to do anything that was going to interfere with that moving forward, and that's why I made sure when I talked with Derek yesterday that this in fact was even with the latest revision, that was consistent with Mr. Hume, our outside counsel that we've been working.
So to be clear, your office has seen the latest version with the changes from the city of Pasco that Mr. Bratton referred to, but couldn't tell us which version we had.
Right, he sent some documents.
This is it.
Okay.
And I was satisfied with the rendition that was a joint process with the review.
Okay, all right. So the review I was concerned about sounds like it's already been done. Yeah.
I think the problem is
It's-
that they were named the same or similar names, so it was difficult to figure out.
Okay, so the new version is in the printed book. It's not in the electronic read-aheads. Okay, thanks.
Your book's right behind you there.
Chairman, did you have any other questions on that? Does that seem like-
I would like to review both the old and the new before I sign it. I just don't feel comfortable signing something that I haven't reviewed myself, but I know the council has and our outside counsel has, so if they're good with it, I'm good with it. I'm going to review it, and I might have questions next meeting.
So I'm sorry, I missed that last comment. Was that suggesting you want to hold this or you want action today?
Well, they made mention that our outside counsel has recommended it and reviewed it, so I'm good with moving this along, but I am going to review both copies, and I don't know if I'll have any questions or not next meeting.
I did not write this language. This is what was provided by our outside legal. I thought I had articulated that.
Yeah, well, you did, and it
I
spells out three paths that
Yeah.
were pretty clear. So I'd move to approve ordinance 04-2022.
B.
Well, we had some discussion about that.
I'd be fine with either one. I think the language of repeal and replace. Fine, if we want to keep the name or if we.
Okay, so I'll finish my motion by saying, with said ordinance to be identified as 04-2022B as in Bravo, and to add at the closing stanzas a statement to the effect that this supersedes 04-2022.
My second. All in favor, say aye.
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 In doubt, do both.
And we'll have that by close of business today.
And I understand the B can help with codification, so.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Bratton.
you.
Administration Office Business, Mr. Davidson, nothing. Public comment. Anybody for public comment? There is a caller? Okay. Well, I see Mr. Doxeter coming forward. Okay, we'll take the caller first.
Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes.
Gone? trying to
Hello?
reestablish?
Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. So, I'd heard Brad Peck earlier say something about first do no harm. And it kind of struck me as, well, isn't that obvious? But with our country, with our cities suffering from the things they are while we're still going through, I guess, like we have RSV, COVID, the flu really hard right now. The vulnerable in our city are being hit the worst. When you look at those in charge, the police, those city leaders, we set it up kind of like a military, right? We have a captain at the top, and it goes down and filters down to the patrol deputies, patrol officers. There's a controlling of the narrative over and over. A hostage was just shot in our county, and it seems like nobody really cares about. As Clint Didier said, where's her representation? He didn't say it about her, but putting his words to her, where's her representation? She was a hostage. And instead of de-escalating, running, using your body armor that you have on you and running and hiding for your life, you shot through a hostage and reacted in a way that then the narrative is controlled by the captain. 2019, the captain, who was not the captain at the time, or the chief of police, I should say, Ken Roski, was there, witnessed a sergeant give orders to a patrol deputy. That deputy disobeyed those orders to the point to where the sergeant had to pull him away from a disabled individual. And instead of saying, hey, stepping in as a captain and saying I shouldn't do that, what he did was control the narrative. And then you find out that Ken Roski has been caught with what they call quid pro quo, or sexual relations with female officers in the station that he was over top of, and he just worked his way up to captain. That's because if you cover my back and pat my back, I'll cover your back and pat your back. And when you disobey a direct sergeant's orders in front of a captain, you've got nothing to be worried about here. We'll just control the narrative. We don't care about our citizens. We don't care about the disabled. We don't care about their right. And then it stretches further because when the disabled come to this meeting here and speak about it, then they're ignored and said, take it up with the courts, who are 3 years in still not accommodating the disabled. 3 years in, on the verbatim record. Anyone can look this up. But what they want you to do is ignore it. Ignore the disabled, ignore the poor, ignore the suffering. We're building a state city here. We want our $300 for our entryway to your property. Now pay us for everything, including our health insurance, our raises. And it's a cost because it's part of making that's low rent. No offense, but I like $100. I think where we started out, Clint said something about $100 start and just a flat fee. This whole, we're going to get all our money back and cover every dime that we spend everywhere off all of our citizens. It's just going to push people away. It's just going to make your citizens more stressed out. They're going to have to do things to make that $500 up. And they're going to do things that's going to make a negative impact on your community that you can't stop. You can't stop that negative impact once you start taxing and penalizing and putting fees on citizens. So just realize that your police are killing people.
Thank you very much. Your 3 minutes has elapsed, but thank you very much.
Couple points I'd like to make. One, we're getting ready to start a new year. I would really like to see the county commissioners have a workshop once a month so that the public could put more input in to certain things that are going on or what's happening, just like this entryway, driveway deal, what people are having to do. That affects the whole county. At least give them a shot. The other thing, and I'm going to bring it up again, I brought it up once, this moratorium to satisfy future-wise, I don't know why we had to go for another 6 months if we're going to have a court date or should have a results within the next 60 days. I think it should have been limited to 60 days instead of 6 months. And the other thing is relook at our planning out there where we're Ag 20 and change that so we don't have to fight future-wise in the future. We're already a fourth of the way through the comp plan before it has to be redone again, and we're still not approved. Let's start looking ahead and get this solved so we're not bending to the will to a bunch of damn environmentalists that don't even live here, and most of them aren't even from our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Mr. Chairman, just an administrative note, the moratorium that was passed can be lifted by the board once we have resolution from the courts. So the fact that we passed the 6-month doesn't mean it has to run the full 6 months.
Anybody on the phone, Mr. Davidson?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing no more public comment, I believe we do need one executive session. Mr. Davidson, will you call that, please?
Yes, we'll just need a brief executive session concerning RCW 423110, Section 1, subsection I, and 4230-140, Section 4. See the prosecuting attorneys here and an HR director. You know, if we could have an executive session, probably no longer than 10 minutes.
Okay.
Question before you go into executive session?
Mm-hmm.
Is this involved in any of my staff?
No, does it? No? No. No, we've already went there. Let's just announce it and we'll see. So, have we announced a executive session? Did we announce it outside?
I thought you just announced that.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
announced it.
okay, we're ready to go?
Yeah. Okay, we came out of executive session. We'd like to extend for another 10 minutes underneath the same RCWs. Thank you. We've come out of executive session. We're back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.